you can't fix what's broken, when you have to distance yourself in a relationship. Hello, y'all. I'm Diana Brienne. We all just had my morning cup of coffee and sort of waking up here. And I wanted to come on here and talk about when you have to step out of a relationship, when you have to distance yourself from someone that you love. You know, I was talking about in another video how I was talking to this couple, and they had someone in their life that they loved very much. But this person was traveling down a very wrong road, and they continued to make one bad decision after the other, to the point that the parents actually got physically sick over time because it was just affecting them emotionally. And I really got to thinking about that. What do you do when someone you love is making bad choices, chronic bad choices, and you've helped them navigate, you might have even stepped in financially, you have stepped in emotionally, you tried to give them support, guidance, and it just is chronic. It goes on and on and on and on. So what do? Sometimes you have to distance yourself to save yourself. And I believe that when a person does that, you need to do it lovingly, kindly, thoughtfully, but firmly in the right way. Meaning that sometimes with some people, you can't have any contact, at least for a period of time. And sometimes that person will eventually get their life together and sometimes not. I've seen people go both ways where, things got so bad that they realized that they had to make permanent change. And then I've seen people that made temporary change and went right back to the bad behaviors. And then I've seen other people who made no change at all. And there are people that they don't learn from their mistakes. They don't learn from any of that. They just continue. So what do? You've got to do what's right for you also, because you're a person and it can affect you. It can make you sick. It can really, really affect your life. And it was affecting their marriage, it was affecting their health, it was affecting their finances, it was affecting everything. They tried to rescue, they tried to fix, they tried to help this person. But this person made chronic bad decisions. Chronic. And they didn't want to change. And they were disruptive. They were disruptive to any harmony. They had brought this person back into their home, and it just disrupted everything. It was terrible. It was a mess. And finally, they reached a point where they quit trying to fix that person's problems, because they knew that no matter what they fixed, that person was going to break it again. And they just let go. They let go lovingly. They distanced themselves. They quit taking phone calls. They quit texting. They quit all that. But they let that person know that they loved them, and then they were going to step back and let that person figure their own problem out. And it's sad when you get to that point. It's very, very sad, and no one wants to reach that point in a relationship, especially with someone that they love. If you don't love somebody or whatever, then that can be a much easier way. But when it's somebody that you love and care about, whether it's a family member, a dear friend, whatever, there's all kinds of problems out there, and none of us are perfect. And there are times that we've made mistakes, we've screwed up. Everybody has. And we want people that are forgiving and loving. Forgiveness is not necessarily stepping back into a relationship with somebody. But this person was chronically making decisions that affected anybody that was around them. I remember another situation where this was many, many years ago, but where the daughter just chronically had one issue after the other. She picked wrong guys. She ended up in jail, all kinds of things. Eventually, she ended up dying. And I believe that she picked up some kind of, disease or something and died. But she had ripped off her parents. She had taken their credit card, and the parents didn't want to, they had to pay off that credit card debt, and it was a lot. And but they didn't want to, had they, said, hey, this is, theft, and it was done, then there would have been, the daughter would have probably gone back to jail, and they didn't want that. But they had to put her out. They had to put her out. She was an adult. This was I think the daughter was like in her 30s at the time, maybe 40. And it was just destroying their life, destroying their marriage, destroying their health, destroying everything. So this can go on in families. It can be a sister, a brother, a parent, a child, an aunt, an uncle, a friend, even a spouse, where you've done it all. You've done the best. And then other people don't understand. They go around saying, well, they go around saying that, oh, well, it's your fault, you're not helping them. But often people don't know the real story. They don't know the real story because they're only being told a fake, wrong, misinformation story by that person that's creating all the havoc. And that's what in the first situation did. They went around and they created all this, oh, they're not helping me, and people thought really bad. I knew another situation, this is like 100 years ago, where one of the, it was a couple, and they had, I think, 4 or 5 kids, and they grew up, and the daughter got married to a man who was just a raging alcoholic and didn't hold a job. They had like 9 kids. Well, during that time, they had those 9 kids. They ended up in the street because they got thrown out, they got evicted. And so they had no place to go. And these parents of the daughter wouldn't take them in because they had this little tiny house. It was like a 3-room house. And they didn't have much money. They were just trying to scratch by themselves. And here this couple, their daughter and the son-in-law, were creating all this havoc. And if you take on someone else's problem, it becomes your problem. And people talk so bad about the parents, of that adult child who had the 9 kids. They ended up living in a barn. And this is like a long time ago. And then eventually the kids had to go to an orphanage. And then one of them got taken by an aunt and partially raised for a while. But those older parents were talked so bad about because they didn't step in. But they had tried everything, and they knew that no matter what they did, it was going to end up with the same scenario, and it was going to ruin and wreck their lives, their health, what little finances that they did have, scratch and buy, and all that. And they had already tried to help it, but everybody talked bad about those parents that didn't help. But they couldn't, they had done everything. So sometimes you only get part of a story. One day I was sitting in a group and someone mentioned about someone who was homeless, and that they had someone who was rich, that the brother was rich in town, and yet this person was homeless. But they probably didn't know the real story. I don't know what the real story was, but it could have been that the brother did everything possible, and this person just continually did what they did, and got thrown out of places and everything else. So finally they had to save their own life. And so I think we have to be very mindful about, how we look at a situation. We may not be getting the real story. We may be getting half a story, no story, the wrong story, a fake story, all kinds of stories. Okay, so remember, we don't always know what the real story is. And people jump to conclusions. Oh, well, they're awful. They're not helping. They're not doing this. You may not know the real story. They may have done everything possible to help that loved one. And so when a loved one goes astray, it can be very, very, very challenging, very difficult for the people who love them, especially when that person keeps making one terrible decision after the other, one chronic bad decision. People say, well, you need to help them anyhow. I think there comes a point where someone, if it's a toxic, unhealthy situation, it can make you sick. It can make you sick. And I've heard of other people where I met a couple that had a son who was over the age of 18, and he had erratic behavior. They had to put him out because he was erratic. He ended up, I guess, living in his car for a long time. And so it's not unusual It's not unusual. And often people think, oh, that's terrible, and all that the parents should have, did everything anyhow. They did. They did everything. They did everything. So what happens when you're facing something like that with a loved one? It's very difficult. It's very painful. But sometimes you have to distance yourself. Sometimes you can help another person and they've learned. They've learned from their mistakes. But often they don't. They continue right down, whether it's drugs, alcohol, relationships, other kinds of behaviors like the credit card thing that I was talking about. I remember one situation, one mother took her daughter out, her adult daughter out for dinner. There was like a buffet. And the daughter had become so untrustworthy. She was a totally different person than how she originally was as a child. She was a wonderful child, beautiful, wonderful, gifted. She threw her whole life away. She just gotten really seedy relationships, bad relationships, threw her college away, threw everything away, just threw every good thing away. And she said that while they were sitting at the table, the daughter said, oh, hey, Mom, go up and get yourself something. I'll watch your purse. I'll watch your purse. The mother held on tight to her purse as she went up to the buffet. She wasn't going to leave her daughter with the purse because the daughter was going to go, I think at that time the daughter was doing scamming stuff and she wasn't going to leave her purse with her daughter. And it's sad. It's sad when you reach that point in time when something like that happens, but it can happen. And so be mindful of jumping to conclusions about other people's lives because you probably don't know the real story behind it. Just like that old couple that had the adult daughter and the son-in-law and then 9 kids, and they ended up living in a barn, and people were judging those older parents. Why aren't you stepping in? They had. Okay, so be very mindful. Sometimes you do have to distance. Sometimes you have to distance yourself from situations. You do it lovingly, you do the best you can. Sometimes there can't be any kind of contact, at least for a period of time. And sometimes there can be limited contact. It just all depends. And if you're one of those people that have been trying to fix somebody else and you're exhausted, depleted, it's ruining your marriage, it's ruining your health, it's ruining your finances, it's ruining everything in your life, sometimes you just have to step back, okay? From my house to yours, may God bless you. I hope you like, share, subscribe, and I hope to talk to you soon again. Bye-bye.